Working in rounds can be quite daunting at first, but once you've mastered the technique, it's actually really quite easy. It depends on what stitch you do as to how many you start with in the first round. This is UK double crochet, US single crochet, and you would normally start with 6. Each round after that you increase by 6. So that has 6 stitches, then 12, 18, 24, and so on. Increasing 6 stitches each time will give you a nice even circle, and it will lay nice and flat. The secret to making a circle is your increases. We already now know that we need to increase 6 in each round, but where you increase will make a difference. You will see on this one that I have increased in the same place each time, and eventually after about round 5 it will start to take on the shape of how many increases. So I've increased 6 and it's turning into a hexagon. That's absolutely fine if you want to make a hexagon, but if you want to make it a circle, then all you need to do is change where you increase each time. So this one is nice and round, and after round 5 every other row I increased in the middle of the sequence. If you're working in UK double crochet, US single crochet, you don't join the round each time, you just do a continual circle. It's really important that you use a stitch marker to mark the beginning of your round. If you do the method that I do, you'll break your round down into 6 sections. The sequence in those sections will be the same for the complete round. We would start off with 6 stitches in the centre, and then we will increase to 12. So that means that we need to work 2 stitches in each of the 6 stitches from the first round to give us 12. So then in the third round we would need to increase equally in those 6 sections. In the second round we increased in every stitch to get our 6 stitch increase to take us from 6 to 12, and in the third round we'd need to increase in every other stitch to get from 12 to 18. So the sequence for the third round would be increase into the first stitch, normal stitch in the second, increase in the third stitch, normal for the fourth, increase in the 5th stitch, and so on till you repeat that 6 times in that round. In the 4th round we need to again increase 6 stitches evenly around the round, so that would be another 6 section sequence, and you just keep repeating the sequence for 6 times in each of the round. Once you get to round 5 it starts to form a shape. So as we're increasing 6 times, it's taking on the shape of a hexagon. So after round 5, it's a good idea then to increase in the middle of the sequence. I've included a chart to show you the sequence for the UK double crochet, US single crochet working in rounds. And you will see that in round 6, you do the increase in the middle of the sequence. By working the increase on the even rows, then it means that you will have the same amount of stitches each side of the increase in the sequence. It sounds quite complicated, but it isn't. If you just remember to break each round down into 6 parts, and each of those 6 parts you'll do exactly the same sequence. So then on round 7, the odd round, you'll go back to increasing at the beginning of the sequence. In round 8, you'll increase in the middle of the sequence, and so on. And you can keep doing this for as many rounds as you want, which is actually great if you're doing something like a rug, because you'll have a lot of rounds in that. So you would just work the increase at the beginning of the odd rows and the increase in the middle of the sequence of the even rows. For UK trebles or US double crochet, it's slightly different. You'll start with 12 in your centre, and this is because it's a much taller stitch. If we were to do 6, we'd have a little cone stuck out in the middle and it would take on the shape of a cone. By working 12, it means that that's nice and flat, and it's exactly the same as the double crochet version, is you will increase the same amount of stitches in each round. So we started off with 12 in the centre, which means we evenly need to work 12 increases in each of these rounds. So the first one we would increase 12, so it would take us from 12 to 24 stitches, 24 to 36, 36 to 48, and so on. It's exactly the same principle as the double crochet, is that after round 5, on the even rounds, you increase in the middle of the sequence. But instead of breaking it down into 6, because we are increasing 12 in each round, you would break the sections down into 12. For the treble stitch, you don't really need to put a stitch marker because it is very, very obvious where the start of the round is. As the UK double crochet is a continual round, there's no transition, so it's really smooth going from one round to the next. So I'm just going to show you how to work the UK treble in the round. So let's get started. As with most of my demonstrations, I use a nice large hook so that you can see the stitches better. And I'm using, just for the purpose to make it clearer, a double strand. So I'm going to start with a magic ring. You can use a chain. If you're new to working the round, you can just create your ring by working a 4 or 5 chain and then slip stitching back into the first stitch. But we're going to start with a 3 chain, and this will count as our first treble stitch. I'm working in UK terms for this demonstration. So we're going to work our first treble. So yarn over, insert into the ring, yarn over, pull through, 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, take off the first 2, yarn over, take off the second 2. So you just work a total, including the 3 chain, a total of 8 stitches into that centre ring. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So you'll either have the ring full now, or you just close up your magic ring. To close the round, we're going to work into the stitch that's just at the top of the 3 chain. So we have our 3 chain here, and we're going to work in this stitch here with a slip stitch. So now if I prise it apart, you'll see that we have the 3 chain here, and we've slip stitched into the top of the stitch to the left of it. To start the next round, we're going to be turning these 12 stitches into 24, so we need to increase in every stitch in order to do that. So we work a 3 chain, which counts as our first treble, and then we're going to go into the stitch where the 3 chain has been created, and that will be an increase. So we do a treble down into that stitch, so that is our first increase of the round. So now you have 11 stitches left, and you need to work 2 stitches in each of those. So in other words, you're working an increase in every stitch from round 1. If I pull this apart, you can see you have the space at the bottom, or you have this little loop at the top there. Doesn't matter where you insert your hook. I prefer to insert it in this little space here because I think it makes the circle lay nice and flat. But it's up to you. You can go in that bottom one if you want to, but for the purpose of the demonstration I will be going into the top. So you insert into that top and work 2 treble, and that's now our second increase stitch. So you just put an increase in each of those stitches. So I've now done my increase in 11 of the stitches, and the 12th one is right next to the 3 chain. So work your last increase in there, and then to close the round we do as we did in the previous round, where you work the slip stitch into the stitch just at the top and next to that 3 chain in here. And what this does is it will hide the 3 chain behind the stitch, and you won't be able to see it as easy. There are other methods that you can do that will hide the 3 chain completely, but this is just the beginner's guide to working in rounds, so this is the easiest method. We're now ready to start round 3, and again, because we're working 12, we work 12 in that centre round, we need to increase 12. So we will work 12 sequences that are all the same. So sequence 1, sequence 7 and sequence 12, they will all be the same in the round. So we will increase in the same place in each of the sequences. So for the round 2 we increased in every stitch. Round 3 we're going to increase in every other stitch. So the first stitch is an increase, second stitch is just a treble, third stitch increase, fourth stitch treble, and so on. So to get us started, we work our 3 chain, 1, 2, 3, and again we're looking to work our increase in this stitch. This will be the same for all the odd increase rows. I mentioned that after round 5 we start our increase in the centre of the even rounds. So anytime you're doing an odd round, this is how the increase will be. This is an increase at the start of the sequence. So we've worked our 3 chain, so now we need to do our increase stitch. So we work back into the stitch where the chain was created, and that's our first increase of the sequence. So the sequence for round 3 is increase, normal stitch, increase, normal stitch. So we're increasing every other stitch. So we've done our increase. So now the next stitch is just a single treble. That's the first sequence done. And remember, we have 12 of these sequences all the way around. So the next sequence is again a repeat of increase into the next. And just a single treble in the next. So now we've worked 2 sequences, so we have 10 more to work all the way around. So continue working the sequences and I'll meet you at the end. So I've just completed my last increase here, so I just need to finish off this round with a single treble, and it's right next to the 3 chain. And as with this and every round, we insert the hook in that stitch that's just next to the top of the 3 chain. So rounds 3, 4 and 5 all have the increase at the beginning of the sequence. So if you want to follow the chart, and I'll meet you at round 6. So we've now completed the first 5 rounds. With round 6 being an even round, we're now going to do the increase in the centre of the sequence. So it's still the same, we still break down these stitches into 12 sections. Each sequence in the section is the same, but where we do the increase will now change. So instead of increasing at the beginning of the sequence, we will increase in the centre. It's very slightly different on the even rounds. With the odd rounds, because you're working the increase at the beginning, the 3 chain will be slightly hidden. But because we're not going to be working an increase next to it, it's going to be slightly exposed. So if you just do a slip stitch to the left, still stay in that same stitch, but what it will do is it will put your stitch more in the centre. So then it's going to be closer to stitch number 2 and not have an obvious gap. But now, because we've already done a slip stitch, we only really need to chain 2 to get the height for our first treble. This still will count as our first treble, but we're not going to increase as we have been doing. We're now going to increase in the centre of the sequence. So you'll see by the chart that the sequence for each of the sections in round 6 are treble. Remember, we missed that because we were already in that. Treble, increase into the next stitch, so we work 2 trebles into this stitch, and then treble into the next, and treble into the next. So you can see that the increase stitch is right in the centre of the sequence. We have 2 stitches this side, 2 stitches this side, and your increase stitch in the middle. and it will be exactly the same for every even round. So next time there will be 3 stitches to the side, then you increase, and 3 stitches to this side, and then in the next even round it will be 4 each side. But it means that the increase is nice and central to that sequence. So that's the first sequence completed. So it's just a case of repeating the exact sequence a further 11 times all around the round until you get back to the beginning. So I'll do one more sequence for you. So as we're in round 6, the sequence is treble into the next, treble. So we're going to do 2 single trebles, and then the next stitch is the centre stitch of the sequence. So we're going to do our increase into that. And then treble, and treble. So now we've completed 2 sequences. So 2 sections have been done out of the 12 sections around here. So there's 10 more sections to do. So if you complete those, and I'll meet you back at the beginning of the round. So I've completed 11 of the 12 sections, and I'm just going to finish this final one. If you use this method, you won't be forever telling people to shush because you're counting, because you can simply complete each section, and if you need to stop and look up, then you can, whereas being halfway around the round and not actually knowing what stitch you're on. So we're just going to do this final sequence of treble, treble, increase, stitch, treble, and then again the last treble goes right next to that 3 chain, and as you have done with every row, you slip stitch into the stitch that's next to the 3 chain to complete the round. And then because the next row is an odd row, you will do your increase at the start. So you'll simply chain 3 and then work back into that same stitch as before. But remember, the following round, which will be an even round where you will increase in the centre, you'll just do a slip stitch into the centre of the stitch here, so that the chain 3 comes up through the centre and doesn't leave a big gap, as you're not going to be increasing. So I hope you find that helpful, and if you have any questions, just ask.